morning, everybody. This is Kate Warnock coming to you live from the 2017 AHIP Institute and Expo. We are here with our first guest, and I can't imagine a better way to open our interviews that will be streaming live to you for the next 3 days than Dr. Farzad Mostashari. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you back. We had you last year, so
Yes.
It's great to have a return guest. So Dr. Mostashari, you are the CEO and founder of Aledade, and I know you just came from a session this
Yes.
morning. Maybe let's just start with a little recap of what you had to share with your audience.
Yeah, the session was around how do we get physicians to engage and to lead on this transformation from volume to value, and how do we get payers and providers on the same side of the table instead of in an adversarial relationship, both of us working together for what's best for patients,
Right.
what's best for society, and what's good for the docs. So we now at Aledade, we work exclusively with independent physicians, helping keep them independent and coach them up, train them up, give them the tools, the support they need to really lead this transformation. So we're now in 15 states. We have 1,000 primary care physicians, about 300,000 lives in risk contract, about $2.5 billion a year in total medical cost that we are managing, and doing it by really giving patients the kind of care that you would want for your mom.
Right. That's a good way to put it. Well, you know, I have to ask you, what frustrates you most about the fee-for-service model?
Oh, it's my mortal enemy.
Mortal
It's
enemy.
my nemesis.
Yes.
So people say oftentimes, like, who are your competitors? And I say my competitor is fee-for-service.
Right.
It's continuing to do the status quo, this really toxic reimbursement system that has all the wrong incentives, the misalignment between payers and purchasers, and in many cases patients,
Right.
And the physicians. And it's invisible. What I hate most about the fee-for-service system is that it's invisible. It's the air we breathe. It's the water that you swim through, that you can't even see it anymore, because every single part of the health system has been optimized for that fee-for-service billing, and people who are participants in that system don't even see it anymore. That's what drives me crazy about it. And I think it's like when we work with our practices and all of a sudden they think about, like, oh, if I saw that patient who's sick at 4 o'clock on a Friday, instead of sending them to the emergency room, like, that's a $600 office visit. What?
Right.
That is mind altering. That is eye opening, and that's what we love to do.
Well, so let's take it back. You mentioned, the kind of care that you would want your mother to receive. Let's talk about what is the value of this, the new way,
Yes.
the new incentives for the consumer. And let me ask you too, do they see the value clearly enough? You were
Yes.
just saying that fee-for-service is practically ambient,
Yes.
and here you are swimming upstream.
Yeah.
Tell me how you're trying to
Well,
change
we're swimming
that
downstream
dynamic.
a bit, but
All right.
we're trying to get out of the water and into the air. It is really important for us to be able to speak compellingly to patients about why this is better, right? And here's what a patient in one of our primary care practices experiences. If they go to the emergency room, their doctor's practice is going to call them.
Yeah.
And they're going to say, "Are you okay?"
Yeah.
Right? Because a lot of people who go to the emergency room are going to end up bouncing back to the emergency room for that same thing. So,
Right.
first of all, like, most people never experience that. We had one doc who actually called 2 patients in 1 week while they were in the emergency room. Like, "Are you okay? I'm worried about you." Right? So your primary care doc, will be more informed about what's going on with you. When you come to see them, they will already know a lot of the stuff that you hope that they do. When you show up at a specialist, the specialist is not going to say, "Why are you here?"
So you're putting
Here's
the
a clipboard.
and you're putting humanity back into healthcare, and you're also allowing the physicians, no doubt, they don't want to have to go through the drudgery of the paperwork and making the patient feel like they're a number. It really sounds like you're enabling personalized care.
We're like, I don't want to take too much credit for it. The people who are doing that personalized care are the amazing primary care docs who are out there every day, who have that relationship with them. And the last thing we want to do is come between them and that relationship with the patients. But if anything, what we want to do is we want to strengthen that relationship by giving the doc incentives to spend more time with the patients who need it the most, to extend their connection to the patient beyond just the 0.001% of the time that they're in an office visit with a patient. So having care, we help the practices hire care managers who can call mom or grandma at home and keep tabs on them and help them connect into the primary care doc. So more access, more information, and the right incentives.
All right. Well, let's talk about this more information. Here we are. It's early June. Apple is hosting its web development conference right now.
Yeah.
And no doubt there's going to be a whole new stream of digital health apps.
Yep.
All right, can't help resist. You were the former head of the ONC.
Yes.
Right. And with your expertise, Dr. Mastashari, when are we going to get to a tipping point where there's enough digital health apps? Are we going to kind of exhaust the consumer with choices and maybe negate the value that these new apps might have?
I think like any technology, you kind of underestimate how much effect it's going to have over the long run, but you overestimate it in the short run, right?
Okay.
And there are all these apps, and people are like, oh my God, the app revolution. And okay, there's a lot of skepticism that's appropriate to say, like, look, it's really going to be still a lot of times like the technology that we use the most was invented 100 years ago. It's called the telephone, you know?
Right.
That's how a lot of at least Medicare patients want to get their information and their connection. But I do think that over the long run, if this thing succeeds, and you said earlier, you're like, what is this?
I want to know what the button was. Yeah.
This is the blue button, and it's the concept that people should be able to get their own data.
You're a champion of that. Anyone who can check your Twitter feed, Dr. Farzad,
it's my pin tweet,
would see how important that is.
That to me is the game changer around these apps. Is for me to be able to have all of my medical information in the context of my life. Let me give you just one little thought experiment. I was sitting in my office the other day, and I got a little notification on my phone, on my Android phone, that said, if you're going to bike to the airport for your flight, you need to leave now. Turns out I'd forgotten I had a flight.
Thank you, Android.
Thank you, Android. But what did it have to know, right? I hadn't set a reminder.
Right.
It knew where I was.
Right.
It knew that I usually like to bike.
That's pretty impressive.
Right?
Yeah.
It knew, based on an email that I'd received, that I have a flight leaving at this time. It knew that that flight was not delayed, right? It took all of that and it turned it into an actionable alert that really saved my bacon that day.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why can't we have that same sort of presence that says, okay, I know what your medical record is because you just got an email, a secure email, or you know what patients want to say, like, just send it to me. Like every time you go to the doctor's office, send me the email. That platform can help me put in the context of my life. What do we need to do that? We need actually privacy guideposts. And people often feel like, like having regulations and guidelines and rules around this is going to hinder innovation. Absolutely disagree. What the industry, what Apple needs, what Google needs, what Amazon needs in order to help people really engage with this information is knowing that they're in the guidelines. And right now, for non-covered entities, we don't have those privacy guidelines.
Right.
So from a policy point of view, I think that that could be a game changer.
Do you think that's coming anytime soon? Because I know that
I don't know.
Data privacy and everything.
Don't know.
Yeah, you don't want to comment, huh?
Don't know.
It's a big theme here at AHIP. We know we're going to have a lot of speakers addressing it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll keep an eye on it.
But one thing that there's no privacy barrier to is every plan giving their patients access to be able to download all of their claims information to whatever format they want it.
I have to ask a follow-up question because I've had this conversation, maybe even with you in the past. Do you think consumers are ready to receive that amount of information?
I think they are.
Not to have a paternalistic kind of opinion, but could it be overwhelming? And is it actionable in the way that they receive it, the way you were mentioning with the alert?
So Medicare started doing this, and now any senior can go and download all their claims data, and it's a bunch of text that makes no sense. And there are tons of apps that'll help you understand who your mom's doctors are, what are the meds that she's on, what are the diagnoses that she's had, what are the procedures she's had.
So it's not
it's not the data on its own, it's data plus the app platform.
Right, okay, and that's something that you were saying, so if I have a caregiver, I have a mother that's a few states away, I'd be able to access that.
That's right.
Well, that's a big step ahead, isn't it? I've got one more question for you. So here at AHIP, there's going to be some conversation around a healthcare moonshot. And
the moonshots.
The moonshots, we've heard, Vice President Biden and the cancer moonshot. Give me your opinion on moonshots in healthcare.
Yeah. So, look, as folks can probably tell, I'm a skeptical optimist. So I'm skeptical of moonshots, right? The idea that we're going to pour a lot of time and money into something and it's going to change some of the fundamental dynamics. If I could pick a moonshot for this industry, it would be around quality measurement.
Tell me why.
We know that if we're going to move from volume to value, we need to be able to measure quality.
Yes.
Our current quality measurement systems are, let's face it, broken. There's been a real loss of trust and faith between practicing physicians and the quality measurement universe, where they don't feel like the quality measures that the whole enterprise, the recording of it, the reporting of it, has anything to do with actually improving care for their patients.
I've heard they're almost like proxies to value. It's really not the same thing.
A lot of check the box, a lot of documentation, a
Yeah.
lot of burden. So I would love to have a moonshot where we all get together and we say, how can we use the information that's already in the electronic health records? I'm seeing patients, I'm recording their blood pressure, I have their lab values, I know their diagnoses, I know their medications. Just use that data. Don't ask me to do anything more. Can we just use that data that's routinely collected as a part of delivering healthcare to measure the quality of care adequately? That would be a moonshot I could get behind.
I think that Dr. Farzad Mastashari should head up that moonshot. If you'd be perfectly equipped for that, given your background, your connections. But you're such a gracious guest for us here today. Farzad, thank you so much for joining us here in the GuideWell Insights Lounge. So great seeing you. My name is Kate Warnock. Please keep watching. We're going to be up soon with another interview. You're the best.
Sure.
She'll count us in. It's conversational. You can look at me. You can look at your camera. It's whatever. Okay. It's all good. Whatever you're comfortable doing. What time is your session tomorrow?
Tomorrow morning, 9:30 or 9:45.
What's that? Good morning, everyone, and we're back live here at the GuideWell Insights Lounge. We're at day one of the AHIP Institute and Expo. Hi everyone, my name is Kate Warnock, and I am so delighted to have with me Dr. Angelo Volandes. Dr. Angelo, I should just call you Angelo. Everyone calls him Angelo. Welcome to the set.
Thank you, Kate. It's great to be here.
We're so happy to have you. So, Angelo, I know you're faculty with Harvard Medical School, but you're also the founder, or is it CEO and founder of ACP Decisions?
I'm co-founder of ACP Decisions along with my wife, would you believe it, Dr. Aretha Delight Davis.
Very good. And of course, you're also an author.
I am.
Yes. So, very distinguished guest. We're so happy to have you here. So, Dr. Volandes, you are a champion of enabling patient decisions at the end of life. Before considering the patient benefits of this kind of care, can you kind of paint the landscape of what are the financial implications of end-of-life care as it's delivered today?
Absolutely. So when we look at end-of-life care, what are the facts? The facts are most Americans don't want to die in a healthcare setting, and yet most Americans are still dying in a healthcare setting. So for instance, if you're over the age of 65, 2/3 of Americans are going to end up dying in a healthcare setting, often with a good deal of pain and suffering, and sometimes with a tube shoved down their throat, even though we know most people don't want that. So what we try to do is empower patients and families to know what are the questions they need to ask their doctor, but also what are their options for medical care. And if you think about it, if we help patients empower them with the tools that they need, and in our instance, it's videos to help empower them, they can get the care that they want and that they deserve. And what we know is most people who have a serious illness don't want a lot of the expensive, costly things that we end up doing in our hospitals routinely on a daily basis. So what we're hoping, and what we've shown in our studies as well as in the real world, is that when patients are empowered, they get the type of care that they want. So we're improving patient health, we're improving the health of the community, and we're actually being better stewards of our limited resources by not delivering unwanted care. Things that people simply don't want at the end of life, things that we know aren't helpful.
So Angelo, I know from doing research that, again, end-of-life care accounts for an incredible amount of those limited resources you were just mentioning. Do you have a dollar figure or something, some sort of statistic to let us know just how much does happen, how much is spent towards the end of life?
Yeah, so the number that's tossed around in the last year of life, especially for Medicare beneficiaries, is somewhere upwards of $100 billion. But we think it's far more than that, because what we're not taking account is all the things we're doing to people who have a serious illness who simply never wanted it.
Right.
People who end up getting things because that's the way hospitals work. Look, the fact is, you end up getting things not because I'm asking you, but often because that's the sort of thing that we do as a healthcare system. And that's the problem with end-of-life care. Unless you say, hey, if I have a serious illness and there aren't things that are going to help me, unless you say stop, the machine keeps going.
Right.
And that's really what the problem is.
All right, let's unpack that response a little bit. We have two parties that really are impacted by this kind of care delivery. It's the patient and their family and their loved ones, and then it's the clinician. So take us back. You said that you create this video series. Tell us a typical use case for your videos. I want to know, how do people typically respond to it? And then a follow-up question, what happens when the caregiver isn't on the same page as the patient?
Right, so that's a wonderful question. First, let me start out by saying, as a clinician myself, I'm in the trenches every day.
Right.
And what people fail to recognize is that I became a doctor because I got an A in organic chemistry, not because I'm a great communicator. And we have to recognize that most clinicians today were never trained on how to have this conversation. And so we're expecting them to do something that they were never trained. I was trained to put in central lines. I was trained to do all these procedures, things that I do, but we never stop and say, is this what's best for the patient? Is this what the patient wants? So let me give you a typical scenario. Suppose you have a patient who has a serious illness, let's say advanced cancer, less than a year prognosis, and the oncologist or the primary care physician feels a little bit uncomfortable about approaching what is inherently a tough conversation. Suppose they want to address things like CPR or things like hospice care. It's very difficult to have this conversation with patients. So what we have done is created short, easy to understand videos that explore the sort of big picture. So if you're a patient with advanced cancer, there are certain questions that I need to have a conversation with you about. What are your values? What's important to you? When you're not able to do the things that give you happiness, what are the sort of things you do or don't want physicians to do in the hospital or outside of the hospital? And ultimately, questions like, how does your religion play a role in this? Where do you want to spend whatever remaining time you have? And who should I be speaking to if you're not able to speak to me? Patients love our videos. The reason is because they're crafted by patients. So it's not just doctors, nurses, social workers, and chaplains who are creating these videos. We're a team of about 100 people at 10 academic medical centers. We actually spend a good deal of time hearing from patients who do have a serious illness, and they tell us, this works great, or no, that's really not the information that I need when I have this illness. So these are patients, for patients and by patients. And the question that you asked about family members, that's a really interesting question, because most of the time at the end of life, patients aren't able to make these decisions, and it's really the family member. And what we find is that if we have these conversations way early before that stressful moment comes, we find that patients and family members have the opportunity to discuss what's important to them, and we don't have that sort of disagreement or those really tough conversations. How many conversations have I had with daughters who are making decisions about mom with advanced Alzheimer's disease because they never had the opportunity to talk to mom before she had this illness? And I do blame clinicians. We have to do a better job of having these conversations earlier, of giving these tools to patients and family members so that we could honor and respect their choices.
Absolutely. So let's take it back to the clinician then, and the fact that you yourself, going through medical school and organic chemistry, maybe not the best communicator, but again, as you said, medical education isn't necessarily focusing on empowering the clinicians with the right things to say, and I'm sure that these conversations are tough because they're taught to save and to heal, and a conversation like the ones that you need to have almost makes it sound like they're giving up on the patient, and that's certainly never a message that any clinician would want to have. So tell me, what can medical education do to better empower tomorrow's doctors to have these kinds of conversations?
Yeah, I think it's really important from the beginning to set the stage so that the students understand that it's not just, can you do the surgery? Can you do the high-tech procedure? Can you do a cardiac catheterization that we value as physicians? But we also value talking to our patients. Sometimes I have my residents and fellows who know the patient's lab values better than they do the patient in front of them. I think we have to go back to our roots, which is really the patient story. That's why I think most people get into healthcare. They enjoy talking to people. So what we have done is we've worked with some medical schools to get these videos in the curriculum. So for instance, one of our largest projects is in the state of Hawaii, where we've partnered with Hawaii Medical Service Association, that's the Blue Cross Blue Shield affiliate of Hawaii, and they've actually sponsored a program where everybody in the entire state, all facilities, hospitals, nursing homes, clinicians, all people, all 1.5 million residents of Hawaii have access to our videos, and they're being used in the professional schools. So now it's not just see one, do one, teach one, but a student can go home and say, let me see how a professional doctor does it. Let me see one, let me practice, and let me try to emulate that. So that's our hope, is to get this message early, and that the students recognize that this is just as important as during neurosurgery. Perhaps having the conversation is the most important procedure in medical care.
How about it? Well, one more question for you. So here we are, of course, at AHIP Institute, and we're a building full of payers. The conversation typically is only going to be held between, and rightly so, the patient and their clinician, their healthcare provider. Is there a role that a payer should play, and what would that be?
Yeah, I think there's a huge role that payers can play. Payers can help doctors and healthcare systems do the right thing. I think they can encourage, incentivize healthcare systems, hospitals, to encourage them to have this conversation early. I think we shouldn't wait for that ICU admission to have this conversation. I think payers can incentivize doctors to say, take a few moments out of the primary care visit, encourage patients to have this conversation. And you don't have to show a video right there and then. Perhaps you show it to them and you say, here's a link, go watch this video at home, and then the next time I see you, we can have a conversation. I think payers can also help the process when the people are in the hospital, because we don't spend enough time talking to our patients. We have to make sure there's personnel. This is not just a doctor-led issue. It could be nurses, social workers, trained lay people. I think payers have a huge role to play in this, and I think that the only way we're going to have success is if payers help us better understand this process.
Absolutely. Well, it's such an encouraging message and such a humane thing that you're doing. So I'm so grateful that you spent your time with us here, Angelo, in the GuideWell Insights Lounge. My name is Kate Warnock. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Kate. I appreciate it.
We hope to have you back. We're going to be up soon with another interview. Please keep watching.